I can remember right about a year ago when authoritarian was a preferred word used to describe an incumbent president who had committed such alleged acts of tyranny as making border arrests and enforcing immigration law, or defending federal property from vandals in Portland, or having an alleged improper phone call with some obscure foreign leader that produced no effect whatsoever. And all the think pieces repeated an insistent fear of that term. Should the U.S. be concerned about sliding into authoritarianism under Trump? Because after all, Trump is an authoritarian, and so are his authoritarian supporters. So just call it authoritarianism, because Trump and his supporters have no respect for dissent or your rights, and there is a name for that behavior. It's authoritarianism, and in one of the worst predictions of the time. Okay, guys, we somehow easily got rid of that authoritarian, but watch out, because the next one will be much more competent. Expectations versus reality.
All men and women created by you know the thing.
And that's not to say that Trump never overstepped his authority. He did. I think what he did on bump stocks in redefining and seizing property extra legislatively was terrible overreach. And there are other examples too. I take a stroll down memory lane, not to defend Trump, but to search for the standard here, because there is no standard by which to say that Trump seized power and trampled all over minority and states' rights, but not sound similar alarms about what we just heard from a president announcing he's inserting himself into private employment contracts and into the legal domains of the states and right into your very body itself with an injection against your will or the severance of your livelihood as punishment for noncompliance, plus your public demonization as some sort of villain to be detained for the great crime of living your life as you see fit. Instead, I turn on the news after the speech and all the questions are about how well this mandate scheme is going to work, rather than what rights and legal structures are being trampled in the process. The same people who spent years questioning supposedly authoritarian methods suddenly have absolutely no more questions about that.
Private sector businesses with more than 100 employees have to mandate that the employees have the vaccine. How big an impact could this make?
Yeah, I think it can make a really big impact. I personally can't think of how you bring people back into indoor offices safely unless you actually require that people be vaccinated or you're doing regular testing. So from a pure worker safety point of view, this makes a lot of sense.
As though whether it works is the only worthwhile question, or even anything close to the most important question, as though process and rule of law have no importance at all. We could slow the spread by just outright killing people, but we should probably have more questions about that approach than just, will it work? In other words, the process matters more than the effect. The ends do not justify the means. The means justify the ends, but count that as yet another principle of American governance and culture, gleefully tossed in the trash to cheers instead of the former disingenuous screeches. And of course, an hour's video could be dedicated to all the different ways in which this move is a constitutional shredding. The fact that Biden did this through executive dictate without any congressional authorization or any statutory basis whatsoever. The fact that to the extent that vaccine mandates are legal, they are squarely the domain of the states. There is no constitutionally delegated power to the president to make this sort of move. The fact that an American president actually uttered these words in any context.
This is not about freedom or personal choice.
Everything about our country, from its founding philosophy to its legal structure to the oath that he personally swore, is precisely about freedom and personal choice. Those are the things that our system and his office are built to protect, not disregard as obstacles or afterthoughts. As important as those principles are, it's actually the reasoning of Biden's speech and mandates that I want to discuss today. Number one, he does not have the legal or moral authority to do this. But number two, even if he did, shouldn't his reasoning at least be solid? Tyrants and the truth are rarely allies anyway, so I guess I shouldn't expect otherwise. But even if it is unsurprising, it's still important to recognize that given the contradictions in his case, the truth cannot possibly run throughout what he's saying, starting with the premise of the speech itself, because you don't have to take the time machine back any further than we just did prior to remember a time when Biden was saying categorically he would not do this.
No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power as the President of the United States to encourage people to do the right thing.
And you only have to go back 2 months to hear the press secretary say the same thing.
One, that's not the role of the federal government. That is the role that institutions, private sector entities, and others may take. That certainly is appropriate.
Oh, but that was then and this is now. Don't you understand that the Delta variant changed everything? Yeah, except it didn't. There is no measure by which we are worse off today than we were in December or even in July, relatively speaking to the last year and a half overall. Cases and deaths are still nowhere near their winter highs, and it looks like they've peaked and started their decline. But don't take my word for it. Take Joe's word for it in his speech.
The week before I took office on January 20th of this year, over 25,000 Americans died that week from COVID-19. Last week, that grim weekly toll was down 70%. The path ahead, even with the Delta variant, is not nearly as bad as last winter.
If numbers are improved and improving, then why is unprecedented crackdown necessary? Why drastic course correction if the course is already correct? And if the numbers are improving because of the vaccine, as Biden argues, then why do the vaccinated need protection from those not? It's the two sides of the argument that cannot exist simultaneously. Biden says that if you're vaccinated, you are immune from the dangers of severe illness, but for a tiny fraction of a percent.
I want to emphasize that the vaccines provide very strong protection from severe illness from COVID-19. The world's leading scientists confirm that if you are fully vaccinated, your risk of severe illness from COVID-19 is very low. Based on available data from the summer, only 1 out of every 160,000 fully vaccinated Americans was hospitalized for COVID per day.
If that's true, take the vaccine, and statistically, you have nothing to worry about. Go on with your life. Except Joe says you still need protection from the unvaccinated because somehow the unvaccinated are putting you at risk despite those numbers that he just read.
The bottom line, we're going to protect vaccinated workers from unvaccinated coworkers.
Why? Executive action to protect from simultaneous shark attack lightning strikes would be more statistically sensible, not according to me, but according to you and the numbers that you provided. Either the vaccine works, and if so, then no additional protection is necessary, or that additional protection is necessary because you're a liar and the vaccine does not. But only one of those two things can be true. So take your pick, but the other piece of your speech is a lie. And of course, in the process of that contradiction, Joe forms others, demonizing those who choose anything other than what he commands and the state governors who uphold that freedom, all under the strange guise of anti-bullying and unity. Biden says we all need to come together and unify, and accordingly, he demands respect from all of us.
There's nothing, not a single thing we're unable to do if we do it together. So let's stay together. And by the way, show some respect.
But respect from him you will not receive, especially if you're part of a loathsome minority who makes decisions different from what he commands.
We have the tools to combat COVID-19, and a distinct minority of Americans, supported by a distinct minority of elected officials, are keeping us from turning the corner. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin. And your refusal has cost all of us.
The refusal has cost all of us, but also the refusal has only cost 1 out of every 160,000 of us, and only a trip to the hospital, not even death. We all pay, except for the 99.9% of us who pay nothing. You can't claim these things simultaneously. And once again, just like Bill de Blasio with his voluntary phase is over talk, Joe does not value patience for its own sake. Joe does not value your free choice for its own sake. Those are only values insofar as you choose exactly what you're told. We're very patient with your free choice as long as you freely choose exactly what we tell you to do. That's the language of gangsters, not constitutional oath keepers. And most preposterously, the very guy warning you about other people's bullying says he will do everything he can to shove others aside, even if they hold the legal right to the ground that they're standing. Joe says he will use his authority to get governors he disagrees with out of the way, all in the name of anti-bullying, of course.
Local school officials are trying to keep children safe in a pandemic while their governor picks a fight with them and even threatens their salaries or their jobs. Talk about bullying in schools. These governors won't help us beat the pandemic. I'll use my power as president to get them out of the way.
I'm going to get those people who disagree with me out of the way, even if the voters in their states elected them. And even if they, not me, hold the constitutional and legal authority to handle these affairs within their own states, regardless of your views on vaccines or masks or anything else corona that is unhinged, unconstitutional, tyrant nonsense that any principled American should reject, even if the dishonest media won't join us. Because you'll notice that last year, such threats of presidential overriding of state governors were stupid claims made without evidence. But this year, the same claims are obviously sufficiently substantiated to be well defended in court. And all of this nonsense unironically punctuated with a plea to heaven to protect our military.
And may God protect our troops.
Appropriate, I suppose. Trusting this dementia patient to do that has had some negative effects recently. As our country further fractures along these lines, and the man who campaigned as the great unifier keeps accelerating the divisive language and policy, we focus too much on what the choice is and not enough on who holds the rightful power to make it. Because as much as Joe wants to frame this as a battle of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, it isn't. It's a battle between constitutionalists who respect individual rights and a system of limited government and authoritarians who don't and will use any means they can to pursue their ends. Through all of the screeching, we aren't actually arguing about what good choices are. We're arguing about who should hold the power to decide what a good choice is and to make it. Because nothing about our constitutional design is about defining what a good decision is. It's about keeping that decision as free and as local as possible, both for moral reasons that the individual has autonomy over his own life, but also for practical reasons. A failure to respect that truth produces disastrous results. If history teaches you anything, it's that power consolidates and concentrates until it becomes unstable and it disintegrates spectacularly. And I don't mean spectacular like a fireworks show. I mean spectacular like a wildfire, a dangerous but necessary refresh. Susan says I have to be very careful with my words here, but Thomas Jefferson had a line about a certain tree. You can look that one up for your own reference. Peace is not maintained by correct decisions imposed on others. Peace is maintained by respecting the rights of others to make the correct decisions for themselves. And if you think otherwise, try it out for yourself. Say hi to your neighbor and ask him how his kids are and see how he reacts. And then knock on another neighbor's door and tell him his house is the wrong color and he needs to repaint it. And then assess which interaction produced more amicable results, more friendly living in the neighborhood, and apply what you learned to Joe. Which neighbor is he? The guy that you smile and wave at? Or the guy who's getting a flaming bag of dog shit on his doorstep? Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.